Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching the Wire Wrap. I'm Sravasti Dasgupta. General Anil Chauhan, who is the Chief of Defence Staff, has become the first official to admit that India has suffered loss of aircraft during the conflict with Pakistan in May. Now, this has come in an admission in an interview that was conducted in Singapore to a foreign outlet. Now, this has also come in the same time that India has sent multi-party delegations abroad spanning across to 33 different countries, while Pakistan itself has now secured very key positions in the UN Security Council, which has raised questions about the efficacy of these delegations that are abroad at the same time. To discuss all this and more, I'm being joined by Anuradha M. Chenoy. She's an adjunct professor at the Jindal School of International Affairs, and Siddharth Varadarajan. He's founding editor at The Wire. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get started with the CDS's admission. Siddharth, I want to get started with you. The fact that this admission came in Singapore, and this was in an interview with Bloomberg, which is an international outlet. And of course, we know that the Indian Air Force had said that losses are a part of combat, but this was the CDS saying for the first time that yes, there were losses, and in a categorical sense. So there has been a lot of questions, especially being raised from the BJP, that why do you need to admit that there were losses in the first place, and why do you need to put a number to it? How do you see this argument, and is it necessary to put a number or admit to such losses?
I think the more one raises these kinds of questions, and the more the more insecure the BJP and anybody who asks these questions makes India look. It is a fact that in war, in conflict, when you use military means to pursue a certain objective, military means will obviously provoke a military response, and there will be losses, right? As the DG Air Ops said 3 weeks ago, and as the CDS has said, and now he's confirmed that India lost planes. So I don't, frankly, I don't think it's a big deal. But the more the government or the BJP or the political side of the establishment tries to pretend as if nothing happened, tries to cover it up, tries to say no, don't talk about it, the worse it looks for India, and it needn't be so. It's interesting that the admissions that we've seen so far come from the military, DG Ops and now the CDS, because in their view, they are given a military objective, and as long as they meet that objective as per their orders and their sort of perception, they consider this a job well done, and that there may be losses, there may not be losses. But politically, the way Operation Sindoor was sold by the Prime Minister, by the BJP, this idea that we're delivering a fatal blow to Pakistan, fatal blow to terror, terrorists will be deterred forever, and so on and so forth. When you set that political rhetoric against the military reality, which is, yes, there should not have been losses. There should not have been multiple losses, as seems to be the case. CDS, General Chauhan has not put a number to it. He says numbers don't matter. I think that's not the case. If numbers didn't matter, he would have mentioned the numbers. So numbers clearly do matter. But I think they matter for the political establishment. So I think somewhere down the line, the political establishment, the BJP, is hypersensitive and does not want any public discussion on this. And as their alibi, they say, no, military morale will get affected. But here you have military people talking about the losses, because for them, morale is not affected. But because, the morale may be affected when you have the loss. But talking about it, India lost in Kargil 300, 400 young men. And you could argue, as some did, that this is an area where there's no habitation, there is no, why were 400 lives sacrificed for that? But this was an important military objective for India, and the country paid for this with the lives of young men. And at no stage was it the number hidden. At no stage was it suggested that the loss of these young men diminished the significance of what the Indian Army achieved in Kargil. But the approach of the Modi government seems to be a highly insecure one, because somewhere down the line they know that for them the significance of Sindoor lies in their ability to politically market it. And you can see this in the Prime Minister's rhetoric, the use of this already in sort of proto-election campaigns, etc. And I think this is the problem.
So I want to bring you in on this, the fact that it's being used politically, at least domestically, and the fact that, of course, during Kargil, as Siddharth was just mentioning, there were admission of losses. So if India does necessarily admit to its losses, is that going to translate into any loss of face internationally? Is that why they are refraining from doing so? How do you see this?
First, I want to, say that if you're totally closed on these issues, it's going to lead to speculation, international rumors, exaggerations, which may be totally false also. So I think it's a good thing that the chief admitted a loss. And when he was asked, was it 5? He denied that, which was, again, he was being frank. And the other important thing he said that we learned tactically, which is what all armies do. And mind you, in these wars, the whole world is watching. Then there is surveillance, which would have recorded exactly the losses. And an example is what happened recently between the Ukraine sabotage, and they said we got 40 Russian planes, and they said clearly, no, it was 5, and they showed it themselves because they didn't want this crazy speculation that they lost 40 planes. So it's better to be frank. And the domestic rhetoric actually is what is going to be viewed very negatively, because the world actually knows what is happening, and using it domestically actually goes against you and gives you a bad name. So it's better to be open to whatever extent and have a dialogue with the army and then admit to what happened. And I think this demand of the opposition that there should be a statement in Parliament is an important thing, because the nation does want to know. People were worried, and these are expensive aircraft, and we do know that India also inflicted a large number of losses. I don't know how much Pakistan has hidden that, because that's also come out. And what's happening is that the international press is carrying these. So I think I saw articles from the Stimson Center in the US, from the Lowy Institute, from RUSI, and they're all giving their own figures. So why shouldn't we give our figures when every person who reads and can translate and has a phone gets to know what the truth is?
And I think what's also important is, a part of this information being clouded, is also that the CDS does make this admission, but he goes abroad and he makes this not to any Indian outlet, but to a foreign outlet, which often the Modi government has been at odds with international news outlets in India. But when they choose to make any sort of a big admission of this sort, this is made internationally and to an international outlet. So do you think that, I mean, they could have chosen to do so in India? There is an N number of friendly media outlets that they could have made this admission to. So do you think that the CDS's admission was brief? I mean, he was briefed, or do you think he acted on his own in making this admission?
I think at that level, I would be very surprised if the fact that he gave an interview to Bloomberg and then to Reuters, that this was just happenstance, this just happened spur of the moment. I think that there was probably some thinking that went into this. What this thinking was, I don't know. But frankly, for me, it's not, such a big deal as to which platform where he spoke. In fact, chances are that if he had chosen to give this information to an Indian outlet, and I'm being very frank, given the state of the Indian media these days, I doubt very much that he would have been asked a proper question. I doubt very much that whoever, even if the question was put halfway, whether there would have been any follow-up. If you look at the Bloomberg questions, the Reuters questions, right? So there was some attempt to draw the CDS out to, understand better what this happened. And thanks to those questions, actually, as Professor Chenoy says, the CDS was able to put a context to the losses. Because don't forget, apart from it's the political government in India is obsessed with numbers and is worried about what this loss of aircraft means for their ability to project Sindoor as an election prop. That's Modi's concern. The military's concern is that there should not be undue speculation about the Indian armed forces capabilities, or about the platforms they use or their ability to use these platforms. Right? And there has been some talk, given that this was a fight between Chinese assets and, on the one hand, the JF-10 or the JF-15 fighter combined with PL-15 missiles. There's talk of the Pakistanis using Saab early morning aircraft to target Indian planes. And the Indian side was using Rafale, was using Sukhoi, was using MiGs, some Mirage. So there's a lot of international curiosity, right, about how these platforms are performed. And I think what General Chauhan was trying to also put out to an international audience was that don't jump to conclusions based on whatever you've heard or read so far, and nothing is officially confirmed, right? But based on what you've read, don't jump to conclusions about the efficacy of the Rafale vis-a-vis the JF-10 or the JF-15, JF-35. Don't jump to conclusions about the efficacy of the Rafale's ability to dodge missiles, etc., right? And don't jump to conclusions about the ability of IAF pilots. And so he said tactical errors were made. I suspect the error that was made, he didn't elaborate, was the assumption that if you stay well behind the border or the line of control, that Pakistan, in the past we've not targeted each other's planes if they don't stray across. So maybe that was a tactical error that was made, that just if you're flying on your side, the Pakistani side won't target you. Or maybe if we assume there would be targeting, there was an error made in terms of the distance that the missiles can fly, right? Because the Chinese have sold, it's not clear whether they've sold the lower range missile only to Pakistan, which is the PL-15E, or the full range missile, which can fire from a longer distance. Assuming the Indian side built on its plans based on the belief that Pakistan was using the shorter range missile. And so the envelope or the distance from the border that was considered safe was obviously not large enough. Indian planes should have been even further behind from where, so that they couldn't have been touched. So perhaps these were the kind of tactical mistakes that the CDS was alluding to. And he says that after 2 days of analysis and study, this is rectified. And if you notice, everybody knows that on the night of 9th and 10th, both sides flew a lot of aircraft, perhaps even more than in the first night. So clearly Indian planes were deployed. And there's no claim from the Pakistani side of having shot down any Indian plane, right? So why is it that on day one, the JF-10 and the JF-35 and the PL-15 and the Swedish early warning were able to accomplish a certain goal, but on day 4 they weren't, right? So obviously the Indian side adjusted its approach and was able to ensure that its aircraft weren't targeted, right? So I think that was the message he was trying to get across, that don't just assume that the Rafale is rubbish or that Indian pilots don't know how to fly them. I think perhaps that's why he chose the global platforms.
There's one more thing I want to add, is that the whole point is that I think he was also indicating, and which we all know now, that the whole nature of warfare has changed with drones coming in a big way, the integrated kind of methodologies with a lot of AI and surveillance where you can see a lot. So I think it is a good learning experience for India, and I think the political class needs to acknowledge it. Of course, for them, very often, our military is also a holy cow. So if anyone else says anything, they all jump down. But they themselves, should understand that they need to engage with them. And the other thing is, I think we can't just focus on tactics. It is also the strategy. Of course, we won't talk about the operational parts, but what was the aim, and have we succeeded, and what are Pakistan's successes, and what are the various options? What is our learning?
Sorry, one clarification. When I said I don't think the Indian media would have been able to do a proper interview of CDS Chauhan, what I meant were the Godi channels, because certainly he would not get clearance to speak to you or to Karan Thapar or to Sushant Singh or anybody who would actually put him through his paces. If he would have been given clearance, it would have been to the well-known Godi channels, all of whom are howling at the fact that the interview went to Bloomberg. But had it come to them, I don't think they would have been able to ask anything sensible.
But also the fact is he went to the Shangri-La dialogue, which is very high profile. It had President Emmanuel Macron and Pete Hegseth. So he was asked to go. Yes. And over there you cannot not face the press.
Yeah, there's no option
The
like in India.
Yeah.
So I think a related development related to this, because as you were mentioning about what are the aims that have been achieved and what were the objectives and have they been realized, I want to just tell our viewers that all this has taken place. The CDS's admission has come even as 7 teams of parliamentarians, including former diplomats, have fanned out across 33 countries in order to show India's zero tolerance policy towards terrorism and to portray how terror is emanating from Pakistan. This is coming in the backdrop of the Pahalgam terror attack, Operation Sindoor, as well as the military conflict with Pakistan. Now, the decision to send multi-party delegations was taken to show a collective resolve against Pakistan-sponsored terrorism, as the government claims. But while these delegations were abroad, Pakistan has been appointed to key counter-terrorism bodies at the United Nations Security Council. This includes chair of the Sanctions Committee against Taliban, vice chair of counter-terrorism panel formed after 9/11, and a working group on the UN sanctions regime, which has now left, many are saying, New Delhi red-faced. Now, we know that Pakistan too had sent parliamentary delegations at the same time that Indian delegations were abroad, while it's not really clear yet what Indian delegations have achieved. The fact that Pakistan has achieved this in getting these key positions in the UN Security Council, what does that say? How must one see these two developments in tandem with each other?
So I think these delegations, frankly, the Indian delegation, 7 delegations, and then the Pakistani tit-for-tat delegation, because I think the Pakistani idea of sending people abroad, I think Bilawal Bhutto is heading their main delegation, obviously sprang from what the government of India has done. And I think this is just a waste of time. I think it's a waste of money. If a government is confident about action that it took, why it took it, and it's having met its objectives, you don't need to go running around the world like this and convincing the world that I'm the wronged guy and Pakistan has done this. If at all there was, if you consider global outreach to be important, I would have thought that since anyway India took more than 2 weeks after Pahalgam, right, to launch its military action, time which clearly the terrorists who were targeted or the terrorist groups that were targeted, this is time they would have used to relocate themselves, because once it was known that India would take steps, it was pretty clear that Bahawalpur and Muridke would be pretty high on the list, right? So you gave yourself and you gave them 2 weeks' time. That time could have been used to to make your case. I find now that the Indian delegation is making this case about why we believe Pakistan is responsible. The time to have done that may have been actually in the run-up to Sindoor, so that you build global pressure on Pakistan to act, and perhaps you would have had very different kind of outcome. That's the strategy that the Manmohan Singh government followed after 26/11, when evidence was accumulated, gathered, disseminated, and a certain amount of pressure brought to bear on Pakistan, which produced, I would say, mixed results. It bought India a certain period of peace. No major terrorist attack took place from 26/11 all the way till Pahalgam, actually, which killed civilians in such a large number. I think that this post Sindoor outreach, frankly, is something that Mr. Modi came up with for the Indian domestic audience. You're trying to tell people here that the world is listening to us and what we've done has wide support. Somebody should do an audit of coverage in the local press in the countries where these delegations have gone. Sure, they would have got meetings. I mean, Indian embassies are staffed with very competent ambassadors and high commissioners. So getting high-level meetings is not a problem. Meeting important members of civil society is not a problem. But have you swayed public opinion there? Have you put across a point? And frankly, I don't think the world wants expects that you are going to come there and howl about Pakistan, which is what these delegations are doing. That you're going there and telling them, oh, Pakistan is so bad. Frankly, I don't think this is something that serious countries should be doing. And Pakistan is doing it as a response to India to say, look, we're not that bad. What's happened in the UN, I'm still sort of trying to understand the precise mechanics of this. But Pakistan is a member of the Security Council. It's a non-permanent member of the Security Council for a 2-year period, right? So every 2 years there are elections. India has served as a non-permanent member perhaps 3 or 4 times in the last 40, 50 years. Pakistan has served 2 or 3 times. Pakistan is serving now. So when you're serving there, you will be president of the council for a month, I think in a 24-month period, maybe once or twice. There are 15 members after all. And you will serve on and perhaps even head some of these committees based on either rotation or internal arrangements within the P5 and the non-permanent 10. Clearly, enough members of the Security Council believe that Pakistan has a role to play, a positive role to play in the 1267, which is the sanctions committee, anti-terrorism committee. To that extent, this is something that India should look inwards as to if indeed the whole purpose of Indian diplomacy is to paint Pakistan as the epicenter of terror. For India not to know that the chairmanships and vice chairmanships of these committees were coming up, and that Pakistan was in the running for that. One needs to know, did India make a case with the other 14 members of the Security Council? If so, what was the response? And if you couldn't convince them, what's the point of going to Colombia and Mr. Tharoor announcing that he's got the Colombian government to withdraw its statement where they had expressed regret and sadness at the death of civilians who alleged civilians who were killed during Operation Sindoor, right? That was what the Pakistani claim was. So I think this is something that India needs to introspect about, because at the end of the day, Pakistan continues to be in the Security Council and is given responsibilities. India tried unsuccessfully to suggest that the loan that ADB, the Asian Development Bank, recently gave them perhaps ought not to be given or should be given with tighter conditions. There also India's concerns appear to have been overruled. So the world is saying, look, we are going to continue dealing with Pakistan. And so this is at some level a problem for Indian diplomacy, and this is a problem that cannot be remedied by sending 35 MPs around the world to meet NRIs, which is what they seem to be spending the bulk of their time doing.
So I want to ask you, just related to, correlate to what he's saying, is the fact that India has been trying to become a permanent member at the UN Security Council. Just even in November 2024, the Ministry of External Affairs had informed Parliament that the government accords highest priority to getting permanent membership for India. So with this development, would you say this is a failure of Indian diplomacy and all the efforts that were going on in the UN for so many years, with India trying to get a larger position in the Security Council, now that the opinion in the UN has not really gone in the way India would like it to, in order for it to have isolated Pakistan, and Pakistan seems to have convinced them that they are the victim, as the narrative that Pakistan is putting across. So is that how one must see this development, that it's a failure on some level of Indian diplomacy?
Yeah, I'm going to respond on 2 or 3 things. One, I don't think the world wants to see Pakistan as a failed state, as a collapsed state. It's a very sensitive issue, so they don't want to buy into India's narrative, even if there are elements of truth in it, where everyone knows that it has used terror as a strategy. After all, Osama bin Laden was also found there. So even then, it was kind of covered up even by the great superpowers. So they're going to try and always convince Pakistan to be a normal state, and India will have to rethink about its obsession, just of targeting everything and seeing it through this one lens. India has to broaden its strategy, as Siddharth just said. As far as the Security Council is concerned, now why would everyone in the world only choose India? There are others who also want to be part of the Security Council: Japan, South Africa, Brazil. And there was a group which said that others in the global south who represent large continents should be a member. So there was a group in between during Prime Minister Manmohan's time, which said, yes, one from Africa, maybe South Africa, one from Latin America, and one from Asia. I think that is a better approach instead of saying just we want to be. Because there would be people who not only oppose us, but others who matter in the Security Council will say, what does India bring? Is it bringing international peace? Is it bringing what the UN mandate and charter says? And in this case, it did not. And the other thing is also, I think this whole thing about the water, in that India is being seen as a bully. Even if it's not going to happen that you can block a river, just like China cannot block the Brahmaputra. It's too huge a river. I don't know if you've seen it. Every time I've seen it, it's frighteningly big. So you cannot block a river like that. Even then, just the argument that we could, have some dams and block water to 40% of Pakistanis is seen as a bullying tactic. So if India wants to be a voice of the global south, which they continuously argue and claim they are, then they have to pay attention to the south, to what the south is saying, and being a kind of leader where their strategic autonomy is really very visible, and their tolerance for other countries, communities is also evident. And that's the one thing that I liked about this delegation, is the fact that they represented multiple parties, multiple regions, multiple communities, which is not happening internally. So I think that the fact that we had to do this to show that this is what India is, in fact, one or two of them, like Kanimozi, in fact, in her interview, I don't know which country it was, said that, when she was asked what is India's culture, and she just said democracy, pluralism, and diversity. And you can see also from the trip, the people who came back from West Asia, the group which came back, when they did their debriefing to the MEA, they did say that all these countries, they were supportive, but they said we would like to see India, Pakistan have bilateral peace. So that's important for the rest of the world, of two nuclear powers.
I think this makes for an interesting segue into what these delegations have really achieved in terms of who they have met. So I think yesterday when Shashi Tharoor's delegation in the US met the Vice President J.D. Vance, that was probably the tallest leader these delegations have met across the world. They have met deputy foreign ministers, but in terms of the Vice President level, he was the highest official that was met. But apart from that, the choices of these countries have been quite interesting in that they have chosen to go to certain countries in West Asia and Africa, which several people have questioned that what is the real purpose that's serving by visiting these countries. And we've also seen these delegations visiting a lot of tourist sites, cultural visits, speaking to the Indian diaspora. So what has, in your mind, what do you think these delegations have achieved apart from the optics back home? Because we are just seeing pictures of them talking in Hindi to Indian diaspora there. So why do you need to go there to do that?
So I think first up, I'd like to say that frankly, I have no problem with the choice of countries. I think every country, small or big, is important. And DRC, Congo or Guyana, Colombia, Panama, every country, with which you have relations is important. And so once you've decided to influence public opinion in those in countries abroad, I think the choice of countries, frankly, you could have picked some other countries. You could have just stuck to these. That doesn't alter the core issue with the delegations. The thinking behind sending delegations, and I think that's where I would kind of join issue, because when you say what have they accomplished, I think I would say they have reinforced in the minds of everybody they met that India is a country that is obsessed with Pakistan. That India, if you think of India, you have to think of Pakistan and vice versa. In other words, this dreaded hyphenation that successive Indian governments have fought against for the last 25, 30 years, that don't hyphenate us with Pakistan, don't equate us, we have a much larger canvas. You have, in a sense, turned the clock back and done so voluntarily. And I think that's the biggest problem here, quite frankly, because it's one thing that you had a 4-day conflict, and one can argue what Professor Chenoy was raising was the wider strategy, right? What was the merit behind Operation Sindoor, right? So we can argue about the tactics, but the core objective of staying the hand of Pakistan, deterring Pakistan, the Pakistani establishment, terror groups in Pakistan, has that objective been served by Operation Sindoor? Or to put a counter, could you have actually weakened existing levels of deterrence? Because the Pakistanis, if you talk to them, and they're looking at the same set of data and same things that are happening around the world, they are talking around as they are speaking as if they won the war, right? So they think they got ahead. So if they actually believe they got ahead, it's one thing that you say something for domestic consumption, but if their establishment genuinely believes that they got ahead, and when I say got ahead, sure, they may have overplayed the nuclear danger card to get America in and so on and so forth, but that's all part of the game, right? So Pakistan would like the world, would like India to be confined, to be hyphenated. And so if that's their objective, they seem to have accomplished it, right? So have we deterred? So that's a wider question, but what these delegations have done is that you've just reinforced the idea that India is a country whose canvas is essentially filled with Pakistan, and I'm not sure that's such a good objective. Frankly, you're reducing a large country with a broad canvas of relationships and interests to something very unidimensional. And at the end of the day, that's, I think, the main takeaway for these things. Besides getting lectures from friends and well-wishers, saying, look, people say, look, why don't you have better relations with Pakistan, try diplomacy. And I can tell you that the Indus Water Treaty, even if you say I'm holding it in abeyance, right, it doesn't really mean much. But when the Prime Minister of this country repeatedly says that we are going to stop water from going to Pakistan, and you have the water minister saying, I'm not even going to allow one drop of water to go to Pakistan. This is, if you were able to do that, you're talking about a country like India causing a ecological, human, social catastrophe in Pakistan. Which country in the world is going to support you for doing that? No matter what they think of Pakistan, no matter what they think of the Pakistani military. This is not considered an acceptable strategy. The greatest friends of Israel, even if they're not acting, but they're aghast at the genocide and the stopping of water and aid, etc., to Gaza, even though the Israelis say that every bit of aid is glommed by Hamas. But the world and Israel supporters don't accept that. So to think that Mr. Modi can say, I'm going to stop all the water going to Pakistan, and that we will then be voted en masse to become a permanent member of the Security Council, that ain't going to happen.
So even when these delegations were abroad and Tharoor met once, we don't know whether any of the claims that Donald Trump has been making about the mediation between India and Pakistan, whether that was brought up, what was his response, we don't know. But at the same time, Russia has backed Trump's claims. Even just days after DMK MP Kanimori's delegation was there itself. So, and we have had Russian President Putin's aide, Yuri Yushakov, saying that he played a very important role between India and Pakistan, brokering that ceasefire. So, Russia was seen as India's long-term partner through wars that Russia has fought. India has stood by Russia. But now with Russia echoing the US's claims contrary to what India has been claiming, is that a shift in tide in your opinion?
I don't really think so. I think one has to see broader things. Number one, Ushakov, as a spokesperson, sometimes he says all kinds of things, but Trump himself is saying this repeatedly. Once in 3 days he says that we are the ones who mediated, and he'll continue. That's his style. And he's claiming therefore victory out of 1 out of 3, which he was aiming for. So he hasn't got a victory in Iran, in Israel, or in Russia, Ukraine, but he feels he's got a victory here. So he is going to keep saying it, and I don't think we should bother. The good thing is that, for me at least, that the war was over. It was a relief and there was de-escalation. And yes, the DGMOs did talk, and we keep reiterating that. So on Russia, when there was a Russia-Ukraine war, we are close to Russia. We continued to almost bypass sanctions, etc. But we also continuously said that we would like to see peace. We supported the overall one peace resolution in the Security Council. We were similar to Pakistan at that time, non-permanent members of the Security Council, though we voted along with others and with Russia in a lot. So these little things do happen. Now Lavrov is going to come here next month, and if the our Prime Minister goes to the BRIC summit, he would meet Putin. And just yesterday, again, Russia said that they're going to give these S-400s, which are the best anti-aircraft and surveillance machines. So that goes on. I don't think this is a major issue of them saying it, because Trump is repeating it, and the US dominates soft power and international discourse. We do not. The ideas of the US and from their think tanks and their media is what the whole world reads. New York Times, etc., whether they tell lies or truth and all, we can contest that and talk about it. But their arguments are the dominant ideas all over, and so that's where it happens.
All right, so we'll have to keep our eyes on all these developments. Thank you so much for providing such an all-round perspective on all that's happening on India's foreign policy front. Thank you so much to our viewers for watching. I'll see you next week.